things in our life. It's a relatively lengthy passage, beginning with the first verse of the 20th chapter of Matthew, going all the way to the 16th verse. Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour, the 9th hour, and did the same thing. About the 11th hour, he went out and still found others standing around. He asked them, 'Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?' 'Because no one is hired,' as they answered. He said to them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going to the first.' The workers had been hired about the 11th hour came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. 'These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour,' they said, 'and you have made them equal with us who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day.' But he," now this is the landowner, "answered one of them, 'Friend, am I being unfair with you? Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Start out with, think a little bit about Father's Day. This is a day when we recognize our fathers. People who do research on such things tell us that Mother's Day is the day when there are most long-distance telephone calls that are made to mothers. Father's Day is the day when there's the most collect long-distance calls that are made, which tells you a little bit of something about the attitude between the two. But most of us, I think, we're blessed with fathers who set an example for us, who gave us positive examples. Hopefully most of you had fathers or individuals in your life who gave you a positive Christian example in their life. As most of you know, I really never knew my father, but I had several men who set very good examples for me in my life as I was growing up, and were the individual in as a father figure for me. And thinking about this attitude, in this parable we see some examples that will sort of fit into the examples that we should set for others, as well as examples that hopefully we had within our life. First of all, we'll do really sort of just an analysis of this parable a little bit. So you see on the outline it says the landowner was seeking out workers. Two main characters, or group of characters in this parable. The first one is the landowner. And if you're making a spiritual application, you say this landowner is God. He's the one that is calling workers into his vineyard. And the workers were people, such as those of us here and people around the world and throughout time, who have chosen to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior and to work for him. When the landowner came to them, he offered them a job. He said, "I'll pay you a denarius," which was basically a day's wage. "You go work in my vineyard." The individuals had a choice. They could have said, "No, we want more." Or they could have said, "I don't like working in vineyards. It's too hard. It's hot in the daytime. I'd much rather work in the shade of this place over here where somebody's doing something else. And maybe they'll come and show up, and I'll go work for that fellow." You know, there was a choice available to them. They could have not showed up at all. And the job wouldn't have been offered. There would have been nothing happy one way or the other. But the landlord showed up. He asked them to come work in his vineyards, and the individuals chose the opportunity to do that. We need to remember that this same type of opportunity is available to us. An invitation is given to us to work for God. And as we think about this, we have to recognize the fact that in our life, we only have two types of people to work for. Now, the people in this story that Jesus told, there were probably, over the period of the day, dozens of employers that came in and said, will you come work for me? I need somebody who'll be a carpenter. I need somebody who'll do this, or I need somebody who'll do that. This man said, I want people to work in my vineyard. Go out in the heat of the sun and to do whatever it was that they were doing at that time in that vineyard, whether it was pulling weeds or hoeing or bringing in the crop or whatever it was that they needed to be doing. In our life, we have two possibilities. We have working for God, or we have opportunity to work for Satan. And those are the only two employers available to us. And it's up to us to make the choice as to which one of these individuals we want to work for, whether it's God or whether it's Satan. It's important for us to recognize this. Third, in looking at this, we have agreed to work for a wage. We have agreed, God has agreed to pay us, the deal has been struck. And the interesting part of the wage we can see in John, the 14th chapter, verses 2 through 4. John 14, verses 2 through 4, Jesus describes the wage that is available to us. He says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And whither I go you know, and the way you know. Jesus says, here's the wage. I'm going to make a place for you to live in eternity. If you work for me, I will give you that wage. And this is the salary that I'm going to give you. Now, the specifics are done in a little more detail in Revelations, the 21st chapter, verses 1 through 7. But in this passage of Scripture, we see John describing what eternity looks like, what the new heaven looks like. He says in Revelations 21st chapter, verses 1 through 7, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. This is an introduction now. And it says, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. That's the first part of our salary, that we will have heaven as our home, the mansion that John described, or Jesus described there in John 14, and that God will be our God. That's the first part of our salary. Then we go on a little bit farther there in verse number 4 to hear more about it. He says, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. In other words, that's another part of our salary. That we're going to live in a place where there's no pain, there's no sorrow, there's no heartache, there's none of those things that are out there in the normal world. And then he goes on and he says, and he who sat upon the throne, this is God, said, behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, write, for these words are true and faithful. And what he's saying is, God's true to his word. God said, I'm going to give you a wonderful place to live as your salary for living and obeying and following after me here on this earth. And then he said, and he said unto me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. Another promise. That we will have eternal life with God in heaven. And then finally he said, he that overcometh shall inherit all things. And I will be his God, and he will be my son. The promise of our salary working in the vineyard of God is that we will be the children of God forever. What a wonderful promise. What a wonderful salary that God has given to us. God, as the landowner, is saying, I'm going to take care of my workers. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to provide for you in every way possible. I've paid you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to provide for you. Then the third point that we look at this, after the salary is in paid. Go down a little bit farther there, Dan. One more. I think I got it out of order. The point is that some of the workers grumbled about the pay that was given. That's really the main point that we see in this parable, isn't it? You know, we see him going out and hiring people, and we say, okay, you know, the guy went out and hired people. That's nice. You know, we see him calling everybody in, but then the part that catches our attention is that this landowner paid everybody the same amount. It wasn't an hourly wage. It was a daily wage. And man, those guys that worked the 1 hour got a good deal, didn't they? They could have slept in until noon, grounds the land all day long, showed up at 4 o'clock, got a full day's pay for just showing up and working a couple of minutes. The guys that went to bed early, got up early in the morning, showed up at the Home Depot because they were day workers, showed up at the Home Depot at 6 o'clock in the morning. And this guy rolled up and picked him up, put him in his truck, and took him out to work, and they worked all day long. And this guy that worked for 60 minutes or less got the same pay. Now that's the part that we see, and we say, now wait a minute, let's think about this. There's a problem here. These people are grumbling. And if we'd been the guy that started at 9 o'clock or started at 6 o'clock, we'd been right there with him, wouldn't we? We would say, wait a minute, I don't like this. There was complaints that were made about what was taking place here. They got greedy is what it boils down to. Because these workers said, well now, let's see. If he got 1 denarius for working 1 hour, I ought to get at least 5 for working all day. And that was a week's pay. You know, I ought to get more money for this. Heard a story about a stay-at-home mom that went off to a PTA meeting. Daddy, you can sit in the picture up there. Daddy and the oldest daughter decided they were going to really give a treat to Mama. So they went into the kitchen and they washed all the dishes from the night's meal. They cleaned up everything. They got in the cabinets and they washed things in the cabinets. They got some dishes out and that hadn't been washed for a while. And they ran them through the dishwasher. They got out the mop bucket and they mopped the floor. They cleaned all the countertops. They straightened up everything. They made sure everything was dusted. They just worked and